Hey, welcome back. Today it's time to talk about telephoto for your APS-C Sony cameras. And of course, we're talking about the 70-350 that you see over here. Sorry, I forgot to cover my face. This lens is not new, so there's no need for me to go down the rabbit hole of testing image quality and all of that, because I'm sure that if you're into this lens, you already have watched a lot of videos and you know what this lens is capable of when it comes to image quality. So I will not be that detail oriented in that regard, but I will focus more in my review on my experience with this lens, shooting mainly landscapes and wildlife, because at the end of the day, this is what this lens is made for. It's definitely your landscape lens, and it's definitely a very good entering point for doing wildlife on an APS-C Sony body. It's got a weird focal length, because usually you get the 70-300 or the 100-400. This sits basically in between, and there's nothing wrong about it. It's just it makes your 100-400 basically unnecessary. It's a third of a stop slower than your typical 70-300. It goes because that goes from F4 to F5.6. This one is F4.5 to F6.3, but not a big deal over there. And again, as I mentioned, I will focus more on the user experience. Of course, as usual, this review is split in chapters. So if you're interested in a specific part, have a look at the chapter markers below and skip to that part. But make sure you tune in for my conclusions at least, because we're going to talk about this lens in a holistic way. Very quick on the build quality of this lens. It's a G lens, so it's got everything that you have come to expect from G lenses in the Sony lenses lineup. It's got your switches, autofocus, manual focus over here. It's got your stabilization, because it's a stabilized lens. Switch goes on and off. It's got the function button over here that you see, which is typical of the G lenses. And the only thing that is missing, considering where the G lenses have gone lately, is an aperture ring. This lens doesn't have one, while the latest lens do. But it's not a big deal. I mean, you have to deal with it. I don't think they're gonna upgrade this one soon. As I mentioned, this lens is not that old. It's not that old. It was released in 2019, I guess, 2020. I'm not 100% sure. So I don't expect that to be updated anytime soon. It is weather sealed. It is stabilized, as I mentioned. The build quality is really good. It doesn't make you scream for quality. But it's very high quality plastics. I'm sure they're gonna call it some fancy names, but again, it's plastics, but very good quality ones. And it doesn't feel hollow in your hands. It doesn't feel like it's gonna break on you. It's got a plastic hood, which it's not super big, but once you put it in your like a storage position like that, it basically covers your zooming ring. So you cannot zoom this lens with the hood flipped upside down. And the one thing that it's also got is this lock button over here that prevents you, if you're carrying this lens, that lens may tend to creep like this. Let me show you. Let me unlock it. You may tend to do this as you're walking, with like when you start moving around, it may tend to do that. It did it on me a couple of times, but you put it at 70, then you lock it over here. This lens doesn't go anywhere, even if you try to force it. So everything that you expect from a very good lens when it comes to construction, it's here. It's also lightweight, relatively lightweight. It's 625 grams, which for a 70-250, which is equivalent to 105 to 525, I guess, or something like that. It's not that bad. It's a very almost, I would say, compact and lightweight lens for what it is. When you zoom, you've seen it before, it extends, but it doesn't extend too much. There are lenses that extend way more than this. So all in all, it's a very good quality. It's built very good. It's got all of the things that you need. It's not gonna let you down. Now, from an image quality standpoint, you have a very good lens here. It's already sharp corner to corner throughout the zooming range when it's wide open, and thankfully so, because at the end of the day, it's not a super fast lens. So especially if you're not shooting landscapes, you're gonna use this lens wide open most of the time. So it's good that when it's wide open, you already get basically the best out of this lens. It shows some vignetting, especially at the telephoto end when wide open, but it's not that dramatic. And if you're shooting landscapes, it's not a big deal because usually you're going to stop down to f8 or f9, and in that case, the vignetting is gone. If you're shooting wildlife, on the other hand, even if there's some vignetting, you tend to have your subject in the center of the frame, at least you try, so you don't worry about it that much. And even so, you can also easily fix the vignetting in post. So there's nothing really to complain about this lens when it comes to image quality. It's a very good lens. It's sharp. Aberrations are very well controlled. The autofocus is not that bad, although the only shortcoming of this lens is that it doesn't focus really close, and we're going to talk about that in a moment when we talk about wildlife. So you can blur the background, but being that you cannot focus very close, especially when you're zoomed in, it kind of limits your capability of obliterating the background. But other than that, it's not a big deal. It's not a big problem. Everything else is really good. The colors are fine. It's a really good lens. From an autofocusing standpoint, it's what you've come to expect from any modern G lens. It's fast, it's silent, it's accurate, and it doesn't let you down. There's not much I can tell you when it comes to autofocus. Sony is famous for their autofocus, and this lens doesn't disappoint. Of course, I'm talking from the standpoint of someone who's using the A6700. I don't know how this does on older cameras. The A6000 series, they have very old cameras. I don't know if the improvement in performance is visible or not. Someone who's got all of those old bodies can get you more details on that. But on modern cameras, the lens focus is really fast, accurate, reliable. The tracking works. There's really nothing to complain about. 99.9% of the time, you're going to be perfectly in focus. When it comes to landscape, this lens is probably the main use for a lens like this, because yes, you can use it for something else, but a 70-300 f4.5-6.3, it is tailored for those who want a telephoto lens that has a very good reach that can be used in landscape situations. And in this regard, the lens performs flawlessly. The autofocus never misses. Although I haven't had any spectacular photo with this lens, just because I haven't been able to focus on landscapes from a professional standpoint during this period of time, other than the Etna eruption that you've seen in the slideshow before, this lens performs really, really good and will not let you down. It's sharp, as I mentioned, colors are nice, it's not going to miss focus, and it's got everything that you need. The fact that it's also relatively small and portable helps you lugging it around, because sometimes you miss shots just because you don't have the lens that you would need with you all the time, because if you're doing hikes and all of that, the lens is too heavy, you're gonna leave it at home most of the time. This one helps. Again, it's fairly compact. I mean, it's not small, but it's fairly compact from a long telephoto standpoint. So perfectly tailored for landscape photographers that are shooting on APS-C. The one thing I forgot to mention is still related to autofocus. During my shooting to the eruption of Mount Etna, despite the lens not being super fast when it comes to aperture, I was able to focus pretty easily on the eruption, both manual focusing and autofocusing, and I didn't miss many shots. I did miss some, but probably I would say that was more user error than camera error. I was still trying to understand how to use the A6700 and the 70-350 to their maximum potential, and I was trying a couple of things and I failed sometimes. But again, it was my fault. During my hiking, during my landscape stuff, I really had a flawless experience with this lens, with the exception of those times where you cannot focus very close and sometimes you're out you're outside and you want to isolate vegetation, you want to isolate something, and in that case you cannot do that just because the lens cannot get very close focus, which is kind of a bummer, because you definitely don't always bring with you your macro lens. So having a telephoto that would have some kind of a decent macro capabilities would have helped. When it comes to wildlife photography, this lens, the 70-350 from Sony, I believe is the best way into this kind of photography if you have a Sony APS-C camera, or if you're deciding what brand you want to use to get started with wildlife photography, and you're looking at you're on a budget, because of course there are far better lenses that are specifically designed for wildlife, but they cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. This one costs less than $1,000. I personally purchased for a lot less, and so it's your compact and inexpensive way into wildlife photography. As I mentioned already, there's other options that are way better from a focal range standpoint and from aperture standpoint and all of that, but you're gonna pony up a lot of money. And if you don't know whether you like or not or don't like wildlife, it doesn't make too much sense to invest thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on gear before you even know whether you like what you're doing or not. So to me, this is the perfect way to just get started, get your feet wet, understand if you like it, and then you can eventually move to something more tailored to wildlife photography. And why am I saying that? Because this lens has a very interesting focal range. It goes from 105 to 525, which means it's a 500 millimeters equivalent lens. It's good. For wildlife photography, you get a lot of reach. And the autofocus is really good. It tracks really good with new cameras, with new algorithms. It's really easy to do bird photography, to do mammals photography, because the camera recognizes those pretty easily and it doesn't let you down. It tracks really, really well. There were a couple of occasions where I was shooting, and you're seeing the picture right now, I was shooting from a higher vantage point, which made me shoot in an awkward position where my subject, in this case a bird, was very close to the background. I wasn't able to isolate it the way that I wanted just because I was shooting from a higher position and I couldn't get any lower than that. Well, in that case, I noticed that the focus was drifting a little bit towards the background at times, not all the time, but sometimes it happened. And that was kind of a letdown, but also I understand why that happened. That is not how you usually shoot wildlife. You usually have some kind of separation between your subject and the background. Other than that, birds in flight, birds standing, big birds like herons or flamingos and all of that, I didn't have any specific issue. The image quality is really good. The sharpness is good. Of course, you use this lens wide open just because it's not super fast. So at the end of the day, you need to shoot wide open. And its aperture, it's not super fast, but it allows you to shoot pretty comfortably wildlife. Unless you're shooting at dawn and dusk or in very dark situation. In that case, having a brighter lens, even a faster lens, would help a lot. But you can definitely get your 1/2000, 1/4000 of a second shutter speed with a relatively low ISO, 640, 800 during daylight, without any particular issue. And the modern cameras are really good with high ISO, so you don't have to worry about image quality at all. Again, it's the lens to get your feet wet. It's not your endpoint when it comes to shooting wildlife. But as a starting point, it's a really, really, really good lens, which paired with this A6700, which is a modern camera with the modern algorithm, gets you very good image quality with ease in a very portable and lightweight way. Because again, usually your wildlife lenses are at least double the size of this and double the weight. They're big. Because one thing that you know is telephotos are usually big and heavy. And so they force you to use bigger tripods, heavier tripods. Everything gets bigger as you get more and more invested into wildlife photography. But if you want to start with something, you can start with this one, which is also happens to be a very good lens for landscape, as we discussed before, which makes you basically get two pigeons with one stone without spending too much. In my opinion, this is a really good lens for that. Again, the only thing that disappointed me is the close focusing capabilities, especially like if you're going for wildlife. There's a higher chance that in front of you there's going to be lullabies, there's going to be butterflies, or some kind of weird vegetation. You would love to be able to isolate the subject with a lens that you're using for wildlife. It's the only telephoto lens that you have. Or in this case, you cannot do it, especially if you want to use longer focal lengths. So it's a bummer because it would have been great to have this capability, but at the same time, it's not a showstopper. It's not a deal breaker. That's something that you have to live with, and it's not a dramatic issue. Again, image quality is really good, reach is really good, autofocus is really good. You cannot really ask for more when you're looking for a starting point for wildlife. So as I mentioned already during the rest of the review, I believe this is a very good lens that should be part of any APS-C photographer that uses Sony, because it gets you a lot of bang for the bucks. It gets you very good image quality, very fast autofocus, very reliable autofocus. It's not super fast when it comes to aperture, but there's way around it. And it's definitely not your portrait lens. I mean, if you're shooting something and then you want to shoot a portrait, you can do it, but it's not what this lens was born for. So ultimately, the fact that it's not super fast, it's not a huge deal. And you get something that is really good in a very compact body, not super heavy, actually pretty lightweight. that pairs nice with A6700, with the A6700, but any A6000 series camera, and it future-proofs you because it's a lens that, even if the camera gets better with the autofocusing algorithm and all of that, the basics of this lens, image quality, autofocusing motors and all of that, are good, are solid. So once you buy this, you won't need anything else, unless you're looking for weddings, stuff like that. At that point, having a faster aperture definitely makes a difference. Or you get very interested in wildlife and then you want to go to something like the 200 to 600, or even more. When I invest a lot, you can get the 600 F4 or longer lens, or the other long lenses the Sony does. But as a beginning, it's a lens that should be part of any APS-C photographer's kit that shoots Sony, because it covers you, it gets your back covered for a lot of things. So although it's not perfect, I would have loved to have a closer focusing distance. Although you may argue that it wouldn't have hurt if it was a F4 to F5.6 instead of a F4.5 to F6.3. It doesn't have a collar, a tripod collar, and all of that. There's many things that you may think about complaining, but you don't get much better than this with this price and this size. Now, before I let you go, I want to tell you that one of the next videos that I'm going to push out is going to be a comparison between this lens and the 72-300 from Fuji to determine which one is the best solution for telephoto photography, both landscapes and wildlife, if you're getting started with an APS-C with an APS-C kit. Of course, that test is going to involve cameras, and that test is going to be done between the A6700 and the XH2S. The reason for that is I'm taking the best camera that system has to offer for APS-C. I think I've told you everything that I wanted to tell you. Let me know in the comments below if you have this lens, if you have any other ideas, if I forgot to mention something. Let me know what you think about the lens, and let me know if there's something you want me to talk about when I compare these two systems in my, I don't know if it's the next video or the following one, but it's going to be soon. So that's it for today. Ciao. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Leave me a thumbs up, and bye. Ciao, ciao.